Have you ever noticed that just when you're finally starting to feel better, when the storm in your chest begins to calm and your mind starts breathing again, they come back? The person who broke your heart, the friend who drained your spirit, the voice from your past that once made you feel small. It's almost like clockwork. And no, it's not a coincidence. There's something powerful at play here. And if you don't understand it, you'll keep falling into the same emotional traps over and over again. See, toxic people don't chase who you are. They chase the energy you haven't yet learned to control. They feed off your nervous system when it's unguarded, reactive, and unhealed. It's not you they're drawn to. It's your unregulated energy. And that's why real healing has nothing to do with blocking someone's number, moving to a new city, or burning old photos. Those things might feel like closure, but they don't change the frequency you're broadcasting. Let me ask you, have you ever cut someone off, but still found yourself attracting the same kind of pain in a new face? Different name, different voice, but the same pattern. That's because the world doesn't respond to your intentions. It responds to your energy. Your nervous system is like a silent radio signal. It broadcasts your inner state to the world around you. If you're operating from fear, chaos, desperation, or emotional hunger, guess what you'll attract? More fear, more chaos, more people who sense your openings and know exactly how to enter. But if you begin to self-regulate, if you anchor yourself in calm, in clarity, in quiet strength, then everything changes. The storms may still come, but you won't bend like before. Here's where Stoic philosophy comes in, and it's more relevant today than ever. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What if the true path to peace isn't about cutting people out, but cutting your emotional leash to them? What if you didn't have to fight toxicity, but simply stopped feeding it? When you stop reacting, they lose control. When you stop needing closure, they lose their grip. When you stop playing the game, they lose the access. That's the essence of Stoicism. Not coldness, not indifference, but mastery over your internal state. We live in a world that trains us to look outward, fix the job, fix the partner, fix the image. But the Stoics remind us, fix yourself first. Because your energy is the gatekeeper to your reality. And here's the hard truth. Some people don't return because they miss you. They return because your energy is shifting, and they feel it. They sense that you're no longer dependent on them for validation, no longer triggered by their silence, no longer entertaining the same emotional chaos. And that unsettles them. Because if you truly rise, they lose their place in your story. So today's video is not about revenge. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about reclaiming your peace, not through force, but through frequency. It's about remembering this simple truth. You don't attract what you deserve. You attract what you're ready for. And what you're ready for depends on what you've healed. So if you're tired of seeing the same cycles, if you're done confusing temporary attention with genuine connection, and if you're ready to stop letting others pull you out of alignment, then let this be your turning point. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but a quiet decision made in the stillness of your own mind. I no longer chase. I no longer react. I protect my peace like it's sacred, because it is. The people who are drawn to your chaos may leave, but the ones who are drawn to your calm, that's who you've been waiting for. So don't just cut people off. Cut off the parts of you that let them back in. Because the most powerful change doesn't come from distance. It comes from transformation. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll go deeper into how to retrain your nervous system so your energy becomes your protection, not your weakness. If this message resonates with you, don't just listen, embody it. Your healing journey doesn't start by changing the world. It starts by changing what you tolerate within yourself. Part 1. Why toxic people target you. Let's get honest for a second. Have you ever wondered why certain types of people keep showing up in your life? People who drain you, test you, manipulate you, even when you try to do everything right. You're polite, you're helpful, you try to be understanding. And yet somehow, they still find you. They still push your buttons. They still cross the lines you never gave them permission to cross. Why? Because toxic people don't hear your words. They read your energy. You might say, "I'm fine." You might smile through the discomfort. You might act like everything's okay. But inside, if you're anxious, uncertain, desperate to be liked, or constantly walking on eggshells, they pick up on that. You're not being attacked because you're weak. You're being targeted because your energy says, "I'm still unguarded." It's not conscious. It's not mystical. It's nervous system biology, and toxic people are wired to spot vulnerability. Let's talk about survival mode. When you're constantly overthinking, when you're people-pleasing to avoid conflict, when your gut tells you something's off, but you override it to keep the peace, you're in survival mode. And survival mode sends a powerful message, an energetic signal that says, "I don't feel safe in myself. I'm trying to manage your emotions to protect mine." And guess what? That's exactly the kind of energy manipulators are attracted to. They don't need to hear your life story. They don't need to read your resume. They just sense it. It's like sharks in water, drawn to the subtlest movements. Let me give you a simple example. At work, maybe you have that one colleague who always finds a way to undermine you in front of others. You stay calm. You don't lash out. But inside, you're tense, anxious, trying to hold it together. You don't want to seem difficult, so you stay nice, agreeable. But here's the twist. Your tension is louder than your words. To them, your calm exterior reads like permission. They interpret your silence as weakness, and every time you don't push back, they dig deeper because they feel they can. But what if you could change the signal? What if your energy, without a word, said, "I know who I am. I don't need your approval. And I don't flinch under pressure." That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. This is where Stoicism enters. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, don't respond with equal toxicity. Don't stoop to their level. Don't let their chaos provoke your reaction. Instead, become untouchable in your inner world. You want real power? Learn how to master your reactions. Toxic people thrive in environments where energy is cheap and unregulated. But when you become calm, grounded, and emotionally self-regulated, you become energetically expensive. They don't want to play games with someone who won't play back. Think about it. If someone throws fire at you and you stay centered, they lose interest. They want drama. They want fuel. And if you don't give it, they move on. It's like trying to start a fire in a rainstorm. Your calm puts their chaos out. But here's the key. This isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about owning them. It's not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. And when you operate from clarity, when your nervous system is no longer desperate for validation, you stop inviting in those who weaponize your insecurity. Let me ask you, how many times have you stayed in a situation longer than you should have, just because you didn't want to make things worse? How often have you allowed subtle disrespect because you feared being labeled difficult? How many times have you ignored your body's signals to protect someone else's comfort? Now imagine what would happen if instead your presence commanded boundaries without you ever raising your voice. If you could walk into a room and no longer fear being misunderstood because your groundedness speaks louder than explanation. This isn't some fantasy. This is what happens when you stop reacting to the world and start regulating your own. Stoicism teaches us that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the presence of discipline. It's the ability to remain still while the storm passes. It's responding with wisdom instead of reacting with wounds. And that's what makes you uninviting to manipulators. You become unpredictable, unshakable, uninteresting to people who thrive on control. So if you're tired of being drained, if you're done feeling like a magnet for toxicity, then stop asking, why do they keep doing this to me? And start asking, what am I still broadcasting that lets them in? That's not blame, that's power. Because the moment you take responsibility for your energy, you take your power back. You start living on your own frequency. You start attracting peace, not chaos. Respect, not confusion. Alignment, not attention. In the next part of this video, we'll explore how to rewire your nervous system so that your boundaries no longer have to be spoken. They're felt. Because when your energy changes, your entire life does too. And that is the real transformation. Part 2. Inner work, energetic realignment. Let's take a breath right here. Not a shallow one, but a deep, conscious breath. In through your nose. Hold and release. Because before we can reclaim our power, we need to return to ourselves. You see, most people think power is something you project, something loud, dominant, persuasive. But true power, real, unshakable power, is something you protect. And that kind of power begins with something far less glamorous, but far more essential. Inner regulation. Let me walk you through a simple truth, one that's changed my life and the lives of many others. Power isn't in what you say. It's in the energy behind what you embody. So how do we shift our energy? How do we stop attracting chaos and start radiating calm? How do we reclaim control, not over others, but over ourselves? It starts with 3 steps. Step 1. Awareness. Know your triggers without judgment. Before you can master anything, you have to observe it. Most people live on autopilot. Something annoys them, and they snap. Someone ignores them, and they spiral. A text goes unanswered, and suddenly their mind writes an entire novel of rejection. Sound familiar? But here's what Stoic wisdom teaches us. You don't have to believe every thought. You don't have to obey every impulse. You can observe without reacting. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke." So when something triggers you, don't fight it. Just pause. Breathe. Feel the sensation. Ask yourself, what is this really about? Is it about them? Or is it about a part of you that still needs healing? Awareness doesn't mean perfection. It means presence. And that's where your power begins. Step 2. Regulation. Learn to reset your nervous system. Now that you're aware, let's talk about regulation. You could have the best intentions in the world, be loving, kind, even spiritual. But if your nervous system is dysregulated, your energy will still scream chaos. And people will respond to that, consciously or unconsciously. You cannot fake calm. You have to cultivate it. So how do you do that? Simple tools. Ancient wisdom. Breathwork. Even just 90 seconds of deep, conscious breathing can downshift your nervous system from fight or flight into safety. Silence. In a noisy world, silence is a superpower. Spend time alone, no phone, no stimulation. Just you, your breath, and your body. Emotional check-ins. Ask yourself throughout the day, how am I feeling really? And what do I need right now that doesn't come from someone else? This isn't about controlling every emotion. It's about becoming so aware of your state that nothing sneaks up and hijacks you. A calm nervous system is the most underestimated boundary in the world. Because when you are regulated, you stop chasing people who destabilize you, and you stop tolerating energy that doesn't match your peace. Step 3. Self-ownership. Stop outsourcing your peace. This might be the hardest lesson of all. Most of us were taught to place our happiness in other people's hands. If they just apologized, if they just gave me closure, if they just treated me better, then I could feel better. But here's the Stoic shift. No one is responsible for your peace, but you. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." So ask yourself, where are you still outsourcing your emotions? Whose approval are you still waiting for? Who are you still silently hoping will change so you can finally feel okay? When you reclaim your power, you stop waiting. You stop hoping someone else will bring you peace. Because peace isn't given, it's built. Built through self-ownership, brick by brick, breath by breath. Energetic boundaries, spoken boundaries. Here's the kicker. Most people think boundaries are about saying the right words, but words are useless without energy behind them. You can say, "Don't speak to me that way," but if your energy is shaking, they'll ignore you. You can say, "I deserve better," but if deep down you don't believe it, they'll sense that too. Toxic people don't listen to logic. They listen for hesitation. So if your boundaries feel like they keep getting crossed, maybe it's not your words. Maybe it's the vibration behind them. Energetic boundaries are what Stoics call inner virtue. You become so centered, so clear, so consistent in who you are, that certain energies no longer even try to access you. They can't manipulate someone who no longer seeks validation. They can't guilt-trip someone who's already accepted their past. They can't control someone who's emotionally anchored. When you do the inner work, your outer world shifts without drama, without confrontation, and suddenly you no longer need to enforce boundaries. You become them. So I leave you with this. Reclaiming your power is not a fight. It's not loud. It's not a performance. It's a quiet return to yourself. Every breath you take without reacting. Every emotion you feel without escaping. Every moment you choose calm over chaos. That's victory. Not over others, but over the only thing that ever truly matters, yourself. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to embody calm energy so deeply that it becomes your protection, your filter, and your compass. Because when your energy speaks for you, you won't need to explain anything. Part 3. Strategic silence and stoic composure. Let me ask you something that might hit close to home. When was the last time you felt the urge to explain yourself, to defend your character, clarify your intentions, or prove you meant well just to keep the peace? We've all been there. A subtle jab in a text message. A passive-aggressive comment from a coworker. Someone twisting your words, baiting you into a reaction. And it burns. Everything in you wants to correct the story, argue the facts, clear your name. But what if the most powerful thing you could do was to say nothing at all? This isn't weakness. This isn't avoidance. This is strategic silence. Because every time you react, You give something away. You give toxic people information, how to upset you, where your wounds are, what gets under your skin. You give away your energy, your emotional bandwidth, your time, your peace. And worst of all, you give them control, because now you're responding to their behavior, not choosing your own. Reaction is currency. And the more you spend it, the poorer your inner peace becomes. Let's break this down. Imagine someone sends you a snarky message. Maybe it's wrapped in politeness, but the intent is clear. They're trying to provoke you, maybe to guilt you, maybe to shame you, maybe to pull you back into an old pattern. What do? The old version of you might have replied with paragraphs, defending, explaining, replaying the past, trying to make them see your side. But here's the truth. Some people aren't confused. They're committed to misunderstanding you, and no amount of explanation will change that. So what if, instead, you didn't respond? What if you just observed, breathed, paused, and said, "Not today"? This is the art of non-reaction, and it's one of the greatest tools you'll ever develop, not just in relationships, but in life. Because silence is more than the absence of words. It's the presence of strength. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, said it best. You always have the option of having no opinion. You don't have to take the bait. You don't have to insert yourself into every conflict. You don't have to correct every misconception. And that, right there, is power. Because think about it. What would happen if your peace no longer depended on being understood? What if you could sit in discomfort, not as a victim, but as a master of your emotional terrain? That's not coldness. That's composure. And the world today desperately needs more of it. We live in a time where everyone is yelling to be heard. Everyone has something to say. Everyone's reacting to headlines, to comments, to microaggressions. But the Stoic way? It's not about being loud. It's about being rooted. It's about being able to witness the chaos and not become part of it. To let people say what they will, without letting it penetrate your peace. It's about knowing who you are so deeply that you no longer need outside validation to feel secure. Let me give you a quick story. There was a time when someone close to me would always send texts laced with guilt and subtle blame. It wasn't outright toxic, but it was manipulative. The old me, I would respond right away. Clarify, soften the blow, keep the harmony. But one day, I didn't reply, not out of spite, not to play games. I just didn't need to anymore. I saw the pattern. I felt the hook, and I chose silence. And you know what happened? They lost interest. Because when you don't feed manipulation with reaction, it starves. Now don't get me wrong, silence doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you respond with wisdom, not emotion. Sometimes the strongest boundary isn't a speech, it's a pause. Sometimes dignity is best preserved not by what you say, but by what you don't engage in. This is what emotional mastery looks like, and it's not easy. Your ego will scream for retaliation. Your wounds will beg for acknowledgement. Your pride will crave vindication. But your higher self, the part of you grounded in clarity and self-respect, will whisper, "Stay still. You have nothing to prove." The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that our real enemies aren't other people, but our own undisciplined responses. They believed that the highest power is self-command. Not dominance over others, but dominion over yourself. And that's what silence gives you. It returns the energy you were about to waste. It builds your composure like a muscle, and it shifts the dynamic from reaction to observation, from defense to inner peace. So next time someone tries to bait you, breathe. Don't react. Observe. Let your silence speak for you. And if you ever feel tempted to over-explain your boundaries or justify your peace, remind yourself, the right people don't need explanations, and the wrong people won't understand them anyway. Part 4. Raising your standards. Here's a hard truth that most people don't want to hear, but once you accept it, your entire life will start to change. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you tolerate. Let that sink in. Most of the stress, the disrespect, the emotional fatigue in your life isn't caused by bad people. It's caused by your continued tolerance of what's misaligned. And if we're being honest, sometimes we don't need to cut people off. We need to stop handing them permission slips to keep draining us. Because people don't ruin your peace. You tolerate them doing so. Now, that might feel like a slap in the face at first. It did for me. We want to believe we're victims of circumstances, of personalities, of unlucky patterns. But once I realized this key Stoic truth, everything shifted. What you accept becomes your standard, and your standard becomes your life. If you constantly explain yourself to people who don't listen, if you overextend to those who underappreciate, if you lower your needs just to maintain someone else's comfort, that's not generosity. That's self-abandonment dressed in kindness. And the world will meet you at the level of your minimum standard, not your highest hopes. So how do we change this? We begin by auditing our inner landscape. We stop blaming them and start asking better questions. 1. What patterns in my life keep violating my peace? Notice I didn't ask who, I asked what. Because it's not always about people, it's about patterns. Maybe it's saying yes too quickly. Maybe it's staying silent when your gut screams, speak. Maybe it's brushing off that tight feeling in your chest and calling it no big deal. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus. And that includes mastering your own boundaries. Peace doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes, slowly, silently, through the little moments you dismiss. 2. Who am I constantly making excuses for? You know exactly who I'm talking about. The person who didn't mean it. The friend who's just going through a lot. The partner who's better when they're in a good mood. Look, I get it. Compassion matters. But compassion without standards becomes self-betrayal. Because every time you excuse someone's behavior that hurts you, you're sending a silent message to your nervous system. This is okay. We'll survive this again. But survival isn't the goal anymore. You're not here to survive patterns that break you. You're here to rise above them. And sometimes, raising your standards means disappointing others, so you can stop disappointing yourself. 3. What would my highest self never tolerate? Picture the version of you that's aligned, confident, at peace. That version of you doesn't explain boundaries. They embody them. They don't chase closure. They create peace internally. They don't lower themselves to meet dysfunction. They rise and let others rise with them, or fall away. So here's a question for you to carry into your next decision. Is this choice honoring my highest self, or enabling my lowest pattern? Because every moment you're casting a vote for the kind of life you're building. And if you're still tolerating things that go against your values, it's time to raise the bar. Let me share something personal. There was a season in my life where I confused being understanding with being endlessly available. I thought being easygoing meant I had to ignore when people crossed the line. But the truth is, the more peace you build inside, the more allergic you become to anything that threatens it. Your nervous system starts rejecting inconsistency. Your soul starts closing the door to emotional crumbs. And your spirit starts whispering, You deserve better. Not because you're entitled, but because you're finally aligned. This is what Stoicism calls inner authority. You stop trying to control the outside world. You stop reacting to every offense. And instead, you hold your ground, not with aggression, but with clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That means embodying your worth, quietly, consistently. It means raising your standards not out of pride, but out of self-respect. So if you've been asking, why do I keep attracting the same kind of people? Why does my peace never last? Why does everything feel like a test? Maybe the answer isn't out there. Maybe it's inside. Maybe it's time to stop managing chaos and start eliminating what creates it. Here's your challenge. Tonight, sit with yourself. No noise. No scrolling. Just you. And ask, what have I been tolerating that's beneath who I'm becoming? Because the moment you decide to raise your standards, you stop surviving. You stop reacting, and you start leading your life from the inside out. Part 5. Privacy is power. There's a quiet kind of strength in this world. Not the kind that yells, not the kind that posts every thought, not the kind that proves anything to anyone, but the kind that simply doesn't need to be seen to be real. Let me say it plainly. Privacy is power. We live in an age of oversharing, where people post their highs and their lows, their goals and their breakups, their dreams and their breakdowns, all in real time. It's become normal to think that if it's not public, it must not be happening. But here's what the Stoics knew long before social media existed. The more you say, the more you give away. The less they know, the less they can use. When you constantly expose your inner world, your doubts, your plans, your triggers, you open doors for manipulation. Toxic people don't need weapons. They just need information. Your oversharing becomes their advantage. Let me ask you, have you ever shared a personal fear or goal with someone, only to watch them later weaponize it during an argument or betrayal? That wasn't an accident. It was strategy. And it worked because you handed them the blueprint. That's why the Stoics lived inwardly. They didn't talk about becoming strong. They practiced it. They didn't announce their growth. They embodied it. They didn't need applause for the internal work they were doing, because they weren't doing it for validation. They were doing it for freedom. And freedom starts with privacy. Here's a truth most people overlook. You don't need to hide who you are, but you do need to protect what's sacred. Your weaknesses, reactions, next moves, emotional attachments. These aren't meant to be open tabs for the world to browse. They're part of your inner citadel, the private, guarded world that no one gets to access without earning that right. And when someone doesn't have access to your inner citadel, they can't shake your center. They can't manipulate your focus. They can't predict your next move, because you've learned the art of strategic invisibility. Let's talk about that for a moment. We all know someone who talks about everything they plan to do, but never seems to follow through. Why? Because the announcement becomes the substitute for action. They feel validated by sharing the plan, so the urgency to complete it fades. But when you keep your goals quiet, when you don't announce your every step, something powerful happens. You protect your focus. You preserve your drive. You keep momentum where it belongs, inside. There's a reason predators in the wild don't roar before they pounce. Power moves in silence. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone insults you subtly in a room full of people. They expect you to react, defend yourself, get flustered, lash out. But what if you didn't? What if you just smiled, stayed still, let the silence say everything? They wouldn't know what to do with that, because you didn't give them data. You didn't hand them emotional control. You didn't show them your weak point. They left empty-handed. And that, my friend, is a Stoic shield. It's not about bottling up emotions or pretending nothing affects you. It's about choosing when, where, and with whom to reveal your inner world. Not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of you. Not everyone can handle it with care. And most people, especially manipulators, exploit what you expose. So guard your story, not from fear, but from wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoics, wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your soul is constantly out in the open, being poked, judged, misunderstood, it's no wonder you feel unstable. Build walls around your thoughts, not to keep the world out, but to give yourself the space to grow, undisturbed. Your peace isn't a performance. Your growth doesn't require applause. Your strength doesn't need to be broadcast. In fact, the most powerful transformation often happens in silence. So what does this look like in daily life? You don't share your goals until they're achieved. You don't vent your triggers until you've processed them. You don't react publicly when you can choose stillness privately. You don't let people assume closeness just because they know your social media posts. You raise the standard for who gets to know you. Because when you're unreadable, you're unreachable. And that's not cold, it's calculated clarity. Here's the bottom line. You don't owe the world access to your healing, your heartbreak, or your next chapter. You owe yourself protection, and that protection doesn't come from walls built out of fear. It comes from boundaries built with intention. The world may never understand your silence, but they'll respect it, especially when they realize they can't reach what they can't read. So before you share, pause. Ask yourself, am I expressing to connect or exposing to relieve anxiety? Is this truth sacred, or is it safe to share? Am I feeding clarity or feeding chaos? And if you feel like your peace is constantly being stolen, maybe it's time to stop handing out keys. Part 6. When to walk away. There comes a point in every journey, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, or a connection you've outgrown, where you're faced with one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make. Do I stay and keep trying, or do I walk away and reclaim myself? Now I want you to pause for a second, not just to reflect, but to feel that question in your body. Because if you've been carrying the weight of a situation that no longer feels right, chances are your nervous system has already decided. You're just waiting for your mind to catch up. And that hesitation, that internal tug of war between knowing and doing, it's not weakness. It's guilt. Let's talk about that. Because for so many of us, the biggest barrier to peace is not confusion. It's guilt. Guilt that says, but I promised. They need me. I don't want to be the bad person. I've already invested so much time. But here's the thing. Guilt is the final chain that keeps you tied to what no longer serves your highest self. It's not your love. It's not your loyalty. It's not even your hope. It's the illusion that staying equals goodness and leaving equals failure. But what if walking away isn't about giving up? What if it's about waking up? Waking up to the reality that some situations won't change. Some people don't grow. And no matter how much you try to be patient, supportive, forgiving, They still choose the same patterns that keep you small. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. It's not about being right. It's not about winning. It's about recognizing when something is unfixable. That doesn't mean it's broken. It just means you're not meant to keep fixing it. Some chapters are meant to close, not because they were worthless, but because you've outgrown the role you once played in them. And the longer you stay in something that misaligns with your growth, the more it costs you. Peace, clarity, self-respect. Time you'll never get back. Let me say this clearly. Walking away is not revenge. It's alignment. It's not about punishing someone. It's about choosing you. It's about standing up for the life you want to live, the love you want to feel, and the standard you want to honor. And yes, people will misunderstand you. They'll call you cold. They'll say you changed. And they're right. You did change. You stopped explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped setting boundaries with your words and started enforcing them with your absence. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. You don't need to announce your departure. You don't owe a speech or a final paragraph of justification. Real boundaries are not declared. Real boundaries are lived in silence. Through distance, by action. Let's bring in the Stoic lens here. The Stoics didn't waste time debating what others thought of them. They didn't try to control people. They focused on one thing: self-governance. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Marcus Aurelius. So ask yourself honestly, is staying in this situation aligned with who you're becoming? Or are you shrinking to fit a past version of yourself, just to make someone else comfortable? Because here's a truth many people avoid. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. You can't rise while constantly pulling dead weight. You can't grow when you're surrounded by people who fear your evolution. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and the other person is walk away. Not out of hate, not with bitterness, but with a quiet heart that says, I love myself enough to let go. I trust life enough to move forward. And I respect the journey enough not to stall it here. Let me tell you something personal. There was a relationship in my life, one I poured so much into. Time, care, effort. I kept holding on because I believed they would change, that if I just gave a little more grace, a little more space, it would turn around. But it didn't. And every day I stayed, I felt more disconnected from myself. The day I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved right away. I felt grief, but also clarity. And with that clarity came something else. Freedom. The kind of freedom that only shows up after you stop trying to resuscitate something that's been emotionally gone for a long time. So if you're listening right now and wondering if it's time to let go, here's your sign. Are you at peace in this relationship, or just afraid of starting over? Are you staying because it feels right, or because it's familiar? Are you growing here, or just enduring? Because you don't need anyone's permission to walk away from what drains you. You just need your own honesty. Here's what I want you to remember. You can love someone deeply and still walk away. You can be loyal to the past and still choose your future. You can be kind and still choose distance. Walking away doesn't make you cruel. It means you've outgrown chaos. You've matured past cycles, and you've remembered what peace feels like, and refused to compromise it again. Part 7. Final Truths on Mastery. Let's end this with the truth most people never tell you. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't chase, it doesn't flex. Real power is stillness. It's the ability to remain grounded when the world tries to pull you into chaos. It's not reacting when someone pushes your buttons. It's having every reason to respond and choosing not to. That's not suppression, that's mastery, because let's be honest, we've all been provoked. We've all been misunderstood, disrespected, ignored. And in those moments, everything inside us screams to react, to clap back, to prove our point, to hurt them the way they hurt us. But the moment you respond from emotion, they've already won. Why? Because now you've left your center. You've handed over control. And you've allowed someone else's chaos to dictate your behavior. But when you stay still, when you breathe, when you observe, when you respond from wisdom instead of wounds, you become unshakable. That is the highest form of discipline. Let's get something straight. This isn't about being passive. This isn't about turning your cheek to disrespect or pretending things don't hurt. It's about transformation. Because pain, when processed, becomes precision. And suffering, when faced with awareness, becomes strength. The people who tried to break you, they were training you. The loneliness that gutted you, it was carving space for peace. The setbacks you thought would end you, they were the lessons that built your core. You don't need revenge. You need evolution. Let others waste their lives trying to win battles that don't matter. Let them argue. Let them gossip. Let them spiral. You rise, you observe, you walk forward. And you do it silently. Because the most powerful people are never the ones talking the most. They're the ones doing the most inner work. Let's return to the core Stoic truth, because this is where everything comes full circle. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus, you want to be free? Then govern your own mind. Master your impulses. Refuse to be pulled by every opinion, every offense, every fleeting emotion. You want to stop attracting chaos? Then stop reacting to it. You want peace? Then stop waiting for the world to give it to you. Build it. Inside, brick by brick, breath by breath. Now let me speak directly to that part of you that's been quietly carrying the weight. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be more aggressive. You don't need to prove how strong you are. You just need to become so deeply aligned that no one's chaos can move your center. That's mastery. It's knowing who you are so clearly that you no longer chase explanations. You no longer negotiate your standards. You no longer let someone's perception of you become your identity. Here's a final image for you. Imagine standing in the eye of a storm. Winds spinning, people yelling, opinions flying. But in the middle, you are still. That stillness? That's not weakness. That's warrior-level composure. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens by choosing silence over reaction. Breath over impulse. Dignity over drama. Day after day. Moment by moment. Until one day you realize the noise no longer pulls you. The chaos no longer controls you. And the past no longer defines you. You've become your own anchor. You've mastered the only thing you truly can, yourself. So if you take nothing else from this entire series, take this. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is presence. The goal is self-command in a world that profits off your emotional instability. And when you reach that level, you don't just walk away from toxicity, you elevate above it. You don't just set boundaries, you embody them. You don't just find peace, you become it. Let me leave you with one truth that will change everything. Toxic people don't lose power when you fight them. They lose power when you stop reacting. Because the moment you stop needing to be understood, the moment you stop trying to prove your worth, The moment you stop giving your energy to battles that lead nowhere. That's the moment they lose access to you. They don't know what to do with someone who no longer plays the game. Someone who doesn't rise to every insult. Someone who doesn't flinch when provoked. Someone who doesn't need to explain their peace, because they embody it. That's what true detachment looks like. Not cold, not bitter, just done. And that, my friend, is the most powerful boundary there is. Disconnection, without explanation. No grand exit, no final text. No emotionally loaded paragraph. Just silence, distance. And elevation, because when you rise, when you focus inward and realign with your highest self, you don't need revenge, you don't need closure. You don't even need them to understand. You just need one decision. I don't live there anymore. The truth is, most of us were trained to chase, to fix, to explain, to overextend ourselves for people who wouldn't do the same. But that's not strength. That's survival. And you weren't meant to survive in dysfunction. You were meant to transcend it. The moment you realize you don't owe anyone access to your nervous system, that's the moment you start healing. You don't need to argue your value. You don't need to prove your growth. You don't need to beg for respect. All you need to do is rise quietly and trust that your peace is more powerful than any reaction could ever be. So here's your call to action. Don't just watch this. Act. This is your moment. Reclaim your peace. Reclaim your energy. Reclaim your standards. And once you do this once you walk away without drama, once you choose stillness over reaction, once you honor your own silence over their chaos, they will never bother you again, not because they've changed, but because you have. And the version of you who no longer entertains their dysfunction, that version of you is the one they can no longer reach. Before you go, if this message spoke to you, don't just keep scrolling. Take a breath. Reclaim your peace. Choose stillness over noise. And if you're ready to stop explaining yourself to the wrong people, comment below with, "I'm done playing small." Let it be your line in the sand. Subscribe for more Stoic truths and weekly reminders to protect your energy, elevate your mind, and walk in quiet power. Like if you're done chasing closure. Hit the bell if you're ready to start living on your terms. And share this with someone who needs to hear. You don't need to react. You need to rise.